We started exploring the world, and I would go to see where he would go. And often it's up high. And I had a fear of heights. I had a fear of falling.
Oh.
And so I'm like, well, the only way to get over this is to challenge myself. And so I started small and then eventually worked up to the bigger stuff. Now I'm not often tied off on a rope, but when I am, it's about challenging myself, putting my mind on task. And when I'm up there, it's just like a sea of mountains. It's magnificent. You swear at yourself going, why am I doing this all the way up? and then you get up there and you're like, now this is why I did this.
I think there's a metaphorical significance to what Lee's just said there. Lee Nordbye, that is, the landscape photographer, the speaker, the teacher, based in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta. Sounds idyllic to me. There's a quote from the photographer Paul Strand, who spent much of his career documenting humanity in difficult times. This could have been a good PS today. What's the opposite to a PS? Because we're starting with it. Anyway, he said, look at the things around you, the immediate world around you. If you're alive, it will mean something to you. And if you care enough about photography and you know how to use it, you'll want to photograph that meaning. Oh, I'd like to say things like that when I grow up. Listen, I don't want to get too heavy, especially because we've only just started our walk today, but we know each other well enough by now, you and I, that if we were walking side by side now physically, I'd look across at you, take a big huff outward like a car mechanic about to give you bad news about your head gasket, and say that the world is feeling like a long uphill walk right now, a bit like the physical thing that Lee was talking about. But no sight yet of the top, where you look down and say, whew, that was worth all the huffing and the puffing. Not everything in the world feels like that, no, just bits of it. I have found myself throwing very stern looks at the telly when the news comes on, like it's personally responsible for what's coming out of the speaker. Is that you again? Did you make that up, Mr. Telly? I don't care much for the colour of anyone's tie, but I do care about the tone. And lately, come on, square with me here, some of that tone feels like it's gone a bit shrill. So I do want to say this, and it's why I say it early on in our walk. The fact that you're here, you're walking with me, you're listening, you're taking this time, we're taking this time. It's a reminder that most of us are quietly trying to do our best, listening, thinking, photographing, not shouting, and breathe. Neil, tell me more about this Lee chap who's on the show today. Yes, I will. Lee. Now, Lee is somebody who's had to change tack in his life for a few reasons. One, the end of a career unexpectedly, and two, the effects of depression. But what came out of all this was something life-affirming. You'll like this. Mountain therapy came to the rescue, as did photography. And as much as this is a conversation about photography, this is also, I think, one of what's becoming my classic shoot the breeze meanders. That's what the photo walk is for. After all, last week, for instance, the subject matter was somewhat more serious, wasn't it, with the incredible photographer Marcus Bleasdale. Thank you for your feedback on that show. I'll get around to it over the next month or so and read some of that feedback out. So this week, the tone is somewhat different. I meander with Lee because I think I am in a proper meandering mood. We talk about his work, we talk about his journey, we talk about friendship, we talk about green spaces, about ice caves, the beauty of methane bubbles. Methane bubbles, Neil. Yes, methane bubbles. We talk about avoiding avalanches, about giving back, and even explorer beards. I think I'm going to liken my chat, to mountain therapy. I hope you'll allow me that. In fact, I think that may well be the biggest learning of this episode. The power of metaphorical mountain therapy.
Today on the Photo Walk.
A bit about my journey is I've had 3 major episodes of depression. And coming out of it, I was just like, there's no way I want to go back to that very dark place. I need to do something fundamentally different in my life. And just spending time with friends was extremely beneficial for me. And I started calling them my mountain therapy days. You know, when you develop a strong connection with nature, it has such a beneficial impact on your mental health as well as the environment. That's why I want to do it and continue to do it and recommend that everybody do it. You don't have to go climb a mountain, but you got to get out, and whether it's in your garden, in the backyard, or just go for a walk in the park. I think we have lost our connection. I think it's in part why we have the world that we have in terms of our environment.
That's Lee Nordbye, my guest on the show today. Welcome along as we make our photo walks each week, photographically sketchbooking our time together, accompanied by the letters and inspirational stories you send in, plus talking with special guests from around the world. It's certainly a one-of-a-kind podcast. Your letters, your thoughts make the show what it is. I'll peek into that mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's thoughts, but before that I want to personally thank those who are Patreon members of our community, or extra milers as you're known, because your belief in this show, your desire to keep us walking together week after week is the why and the how of this podcast. 10% of those who download the show each week are extra milers. Now, I want you to know that I never take that for granted, and that's why I record an extra show for you each week and meet up on Zoom once a month. And you'll hear more about them later in the show today, but thank you also to arthelper.ai, which helps you sell your photos online by making the posts, making the mock-ups, and marketing emails for you. Try it free for 30 days with code PHOTOWALK. The link is on the show page. And we're supported by our friends at Lowa Boots, L-O-W-A, Lowa Boots. And if you need new boots, then you'll be pleased to know that using the code PHOTOWALK, all one word, on all the W's, lowa.co.uk, you receive 25% off the price of boots or shoes up to the end of April 2025. You'll find the links for Lowa and artlist.ai on the show page. Right, on the show today, Paul Friday's trying to talk us into photographing with a fish, but I'm not sure the story you're about to hear will have us dive any deeper than paddling in the bath. Chris Smith is finding his very own mountain therapy in the Lake District, just up the road, well, ish, from me. Another Chris, what, there's two in the world, yes. Chris Hale is reminiscing about a hiking trip with his wife and getting all dewy-eyed in the process. And Myles Barfield finds solace in the mist. Plus, we review the winners of Feb and March's one-word assignments and set a brand new one for this month. A challenge made by American photojournalist and documentary photographer Jim Richardson. So, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. Have you got spare film or an extra SD card? Yeah, of course I have. Check. And walking poles. Let me tell you, you'll need them on the way down. Let's walk.
The letters, the comments, the emails you leave or send in gives our community a real uniqueness. Your thoughts about walking, creativity and photography provide a very welcome respite from the noise of this world. It's a bit noisy out here today. We've got aeroplanes, helicopters, people chopping trees down, the light siren of an emergency vehicle in the background. I'm walking further though, further along the path, further into the countryside and further into the flooding. We've had no rainfall over the last week, but there seems to be more excess water everywhere. How does that happen? Let's splosh through this bit, pups. Come on. Splosh, splosh. Perfect. The email address for the show is stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. We're starting this week with a tale that might send shudders through the flippers of a casual snorkeler like what I is. Here's one from Paul Friday in response to the episode that featured Tim Kington climbing Everest with a small camera and total exhaustion. The letter even has a title. I like letters with a title. Ain't no mountain high enough. Neil, he says, listening to Tim Kington talk about his struggles with cameras and the impossibility of mutual aid on Mount Everest got me thinking about a sport that another of your guests excels at, and that I dabble in, with similar constraints on safety and photography, and that is scuba diving. To take pictures underwater, we typically take a standard camera and put it in a watertight housing. I almost used that idea for the Holi Festival in India, but I couldn't find one that was under 5,500 quid. Yes, I'm slightly exaggerating, but you know what I mean, to find a good one. Some or all of the controls are brought out through the housing with push buttons or dials sealed with rubber O-rings. You've seen how many controls there are on a modern camera these days. You've also seen how the manufacturers like to now use click wheels and buttons and menu options to change the settings. Imagine the joy of finding your way through these or remembering what the buttons do when you're under the water. Like Tim, in UK diving, we're typically wearing gloves. It's impractical to try looking through a viewfinder when wearing a mask, so we rely on the camera's rear screen to frame the shot and confirm focus. And also, like Tim, our prime focus is to stay alive. We won't get frostbite, but we have lots of other things on our mind, or at least we should. Things like having enough air to get back to the surface with any necessary safety stops on our way up, or not getting lost in a wreck, or where your dive buddy is, as they could just be your emergency aid. Getting lost in a wreck, you see, I watch these films of people diving in wrecks, and I've had the opportunity to do it a little bit myself, albeit at a very different level to yourself. And there's something, and I get spooked about urbex, going into buildings which are above the water. But to do it below the water, I don't know, nerves of steel. But most diving, says Paul, is done in relatively shallow waters, as that's where the pretty things are. It's like mountain walking, challenging, but there's a fair chance of assistance if things go awry. The high alpine equivalent for divers is called technical diving. And this is the sort of thing that your guest, Jill Hyneth, does. Reminder notes here. Jill Hyneth does extreme diving with a camera, like into the centre of an iceberg, through its network of caves and tunnels and things I never even believed would exist in an iceberg. I just thought an iceberg was like a thumping great ice cube. And reminder note two, when Jill had dived through the iceberg in the story, only hours later, the whole iceberg, I think imploded, didn't it? Boom, gone. And they all just watched on thinking, my word, that could have been us a few hours earlier. Anyway, says Paul, technical diving is diving below 50 metres, where you can no longer breathe normal air. At these depths, you'll be breathing special gas mixes, and it's usually dark. You may have more than one set of tanks, as you may be breathing more than one gas mix. This does sound technical. You may also carry extra tanks as insurance, or have some tanks waiting for you on a shot line for your ascent. A technical diver must plan exactly how long they'll spend each depth, what their breathing rate / gas consumption is, and how much of each gas they need. The diver must stick exactly to the depth and the time they planned. Even a few minutes extra, or just a few meters deeper, may mean an extended decompression stop on the way up and the risk of running out of gas. Rebreathers have made this easier. Oh, I've heard of those. We talked about those on the show, didn't we? And safer, but have their own problems as they're complicated and introduce new and interesting ways to die. Paul, you're not really selling this to us. I've got to be honest with you. I think there are other hobbies I may put in the list in front of this. Each diver, he says, must be self-reliant. Each diver has their personal plan of gases and tanks and would struggle to carry extra gas in case their buddy needed it. Similar to Everest, though, if a technical diver gets into trouble at depth, there may be no way to assist them without their buddy also succumbing. And then add to that, I'm not sure this is a true acronym, BPF, bum pucker factor. BPF, a standard measure of scariness in the diving world. So Jill's description of diving in caves and glaciers and icebergs Rates at 10 BPF for me. I'd take that to 11 personally, as does Tim's Everest adventure. I'm happy splashing about in the shallows above 50 metres, chasing fish and wriggly things and fighting with the buttons on a clumsy camera housing, but apart from that... So thank you, Tim and Jill, and thank you, Neil. I'm off to plant a flag at the top of our stairs and reward myself with tea and a biscuit in our base camp kitchen. You do that, Paul. It sounds a lot safer. You sent me some pictures, which I will put on the show page, and I did take a peek at the trailer of the film that you told me about that was about cave diving, and I did note down a quote from the trailer, which I think is very apposite. 10 words. The safest thing a diver can do is not dive. You might be able to hear the water from a lock in the background, back on the canal. I haven't made a lot of sketchbook pictures so far, so let me make one now. There's a nice leading line on this picture, a handrail taking you along a path toward the lock that I'm photographing. So F4, don't want to go too shallow, F4, which on an APS-C is what, 5.6? Anyway, F4, 3,200 shutter speed, 160 ISO, and there we go, a sketchbook picture from the day. Come on, pups, this way. I need a bit of help, please. Neil, you always need a bit of help. It really helps the show to be discovered if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. To do that, go to the Apple Podcasts app, search up The Photo Walk, and then leave just a few words as a review. That way, the great podcast sphere recognises us more and suggests us to more people who'd like to walk along with us. You can do the same, actually, on Spotify. If you are becoming an Extra Mile member, do that, by the way, not through the Apple app anymore. You can listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, but don't join through Apple now. Join through the website page. All the W's, photowalk.show. You'll see us support the podcast just going under the railway bridge. That's why we sound different. Come on, pups. Doo-doo. This way. Oh, where's he gone? This way, come on. Doo-doo. What's that, Neil? Are you trying to sound like a train? Yes, do that through the website, through the support the show orange button or extra mile link on the web page. Right, housekeeping done. A letter ahead of this week's guest, which is very apt when you consider the mountains in the story to come. This is a letter that's been maturing very nicely in the letters vault, alongside the Chateau Neuf de Fallover from 1976 and Grattuccino Crumbly's cheese, which has practically grown arms and legs now in my fridge. It's from our friend Chris Hale, which always has me do a double take, actually, because I went to school with a Chris Hale, and he was one of me besties. So I'm sure it's not the Chris Hale. Well, it's the Chris Hale, but the Chris Hale in Canada land, and not the Chris Hale in England land. Congratulations, says Chris, on your scrambling accomplishments in episode 385. I did say this had been hanging around a while, where you went and climbed a mountain. I did. You did yourself and the rest of us near 56-year-olds proud. See, I am at least another year older, and you are too. We're the same age. Are you sure that you're not me old bestie from school and you moved out to Canada land? There's obviously a chance you did. While listening, says Chris, I was taken back to a hiking trip with my wife, then fiancée, in 1994. Our group hiked from Alberta to British Columbia, which took us over part of the Continental Divide. That sounds very exotic, Chris. The scenery was incredible, but I was absolutely unprepared for the physical demands required for the hike-in and then the various hikes we took after. That said, it's still one of the highlights of my life, not just because of the time my wife and I spent together. Maximum brownie points here, Chris. But because of the physical accomplishment itself. That's exactly how I felt. I titled, what was the title of the show? I should have noted this down. Something like I climbed a mountain. And I got a few notes after that saying, Neil, that's not a mountain. That's not a mountain. This is a mountain. What was that movie? Crocodile Dundee. That's not a knife. But yeah, a few people said, that's really not a mountain, Neil. Double or triple that, and you might start to get us a little bit more excited. It was a mountain to me. I've attached 2 photographs taken with my trusty Pentax K1000 that gives a sense of the landscape. Also, they remind my kids that there was a time I had black hair rather than the greyish, silverish hair that remains now. You have hair, Chris? Celebrate it. Whatever colour it is. I almost had henna dye on my hair in India. I was being talked into henna, and I thought, oh, that's quite nice brownish tone, until somebody had a word in my lug hole and warned me that my beard was just about to be turned a brighter shade of orange. So I politely declined after that. Pictures on the show page from Chris today. Thank you for them. Right, this week's guest, Lee Nordbye, is a landscape photographer based in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta. Fantastic. His work is bold and soulful, always finding beauty in the small, often missed details, as you'll find out. There's as much below the peaks as that pokes out through the clouds, it seems. He's very serious about the craft, but not so much about himself. Expect our conversation to, as I say, meander. It's like you, me, and he pulling up a hot coffee, or in his case, a big mug of hot chocolate. He's apparently got a super sweet tooth. Here's Lee Nordbye, my guest for this week, part 1.
Lee Nordbye is a landscape photographer, a speaker, a teacher. He calls the Rocky Mountains of Alberta, Canada home. I can't think of many places in the world I would like to move to more than the mountains of Alberta. It just sounds amazing.
It's awesome.
Now, usually, Lee, I have an A-word ban on this show. Awesome is a word that we reserve only for things like the moving tides.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I got it. It's amazing. It's outstanding. How about that?
No, but I think actually, where you are, I can actually apply the word awesome. It's not a bad canvas, is it, from which to work and get inspiration?
No, Davey, I just look out my office window and I get inspiration. Yeah. Every time I'm in my office, I walk out my door. I drive to the grocery store. It's an amazing place to live and hone your craft in.
You swap the pinstripe suit though for a life less guaranteed. You are a proud, as you call it, recovering accountant. I've never heard anybody describe it like that before. Accountancy's loss is photography's gain, isn't it?
Absolutely. So in 2016, the company I worked for decided I needed a career change. And so I switched accountancy for adventure and artistry. And it's been a huge blast. It's been a big roller coaster ride, but I'm loving every minute of it.
Yeah. How did it start? I know that you've been photographing for a while. There is a story that involves your dad, isn't there? There's a parental one and learning photography under the watchful eyes of your dad. But in terms of turning it into a career, was it obvious that was going to be the left turn at the traffic lights? No,
actually. So in early 16, I was, summarily dismissed from the company I worked for, and for reorganization reasons. And so I took the year off to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I kept coming back to pursuing a passion and hopefully earning the almighty dollar along the way, instead of having spent my whole career pursuing the almighty dollar and hopefully finding passion along the way. And so as the year went on, I kept gravitating back towards photography and trying to find my niche in that realm. And I'm so glad I did it.
We talk so much on this show about storytelling. What do you see as storytelling when you're photographing out in the wilds?
Well, for me, I have over time, I was a typical, when I started off in landscape, I was very typical. I bought one of my first lenses was a super wide angle lens. And I tried to capture those epic wide landscapes. And I struggled. Even though I'm driving along and I love to see them, when I put a camera up to the eye, I really struggle. And so I have found my eye gravitate to the nuances and details of what nature provides, like that photo behind me.
Which is beautiful,
which is an ice cave that we had to, that's a whole different story. That involved a lot of work to get to, but it's stuff like that. So it's often looking deep into a scene and finding those intimate moments that nature's provided, or in this case, grabbing my super wide and taking advantage of a distortion and trying to capture something that's more unique, but it's still detail oriented.
I will remember the words ice cave, and we'll come back to that.
Absolutely.
I have the benefit of seeing this beautiful picture behind you, which perhaps we'll share that particular picture on the show page. So come on then, let's talk about your early days then, and how you discovered photography.
Yeah, so my dad was an avid amateur, and we would always encourage him to enter competitions and stuff, but he would only photograph for him and then develop the photograph. He wasn't a developer, but he would get them developed and enlarged. And we would have all his photographs hanging around our house, whether it's, the Rockies or his holidays. And that got me inspired. And so I can't remember the age, and I'm dating myself, I got a Kodak Instamatic. My sister and I got the Kodak, with the flash cubes and
we did. It's one of the most celebrated cameras on this show. My mum had one.
Did she? And it's still displayed. It's still displayed in a cabinet that I have today.
Oh, fantastic! You got the original.
I got the original with the package of flash cubes in the package still.
Do you remember the smell, Lee, when you open up and I can't describe the smell, but there's a particular smell of opening those packets with the cubes in them.
Yeah, I don't remember that actually. I just remember walking. What I fondly remember is we'd go away on holidays, and I would carry my Instamatic around and I'd capture photographs. And we lived in a small town in northern Alberta, and they didn't have photo finishing or photo development there. So my dad would have to, they owned and operated a drugstore, a pharmacy, and they'd have to send it away. And then I would come each day and do chores around the store. And then there'd be the day that those photos would arrive back. And I'd go into the office, sit down in my dad's chair, and go through however many rolls of film I shot and reminisce about the moments. So it wasn't like today where I get instantaneous gratification. I had to wait 5 to 7 days before I got my photos back from the developer, right? Because it'd be a couple days to send, and they'd have to develop them, and then a couple days to send back. And it was a pleasurable experience. I just loved sitting in my dad's office and looking at those photos.
My mum used to have a rule of how many times you were allowed to use the flash cube. Because I think they were quite expensive. So, no, this is not a flash moment. The cube would come off. A few weeks back, Tim Kington from Lover Boots was my guest, and he talked about climbing Mount Everest. I'm kind of fast forwarding fairly briskly through your story now. You're a climber too. Kilimanjaro was one of your, I'm going to call it a muse, but I'm sure it didn't feel like that when you were ascending it. Tell me about that climb and about your climbs and this fascination you have for peaks. We're going to go below peaks as well, but let's start with the peaks.
Well, so a very good friend of mine in the area is a big adventurer. And when I got out of the business world, I had my last episode with depression. But then I met up with Paul, and we started exploring the world, and I would go to see where he would go. And I'm like, man, I want to go there. And often it's up high. And I had a fear of heights. I had a fear of falling.
Oh.
And so I'm like, well, the only way to get over this is to challenge myself. And so I started small and then eventually worked up to the bigger stuff. Now, I'm not often tied off on a rope, but when I am, it's about challenging myself, putting my mind on task and getting up and then getting up there. And when I'm up there, it's just like a sea of mountains. It's magnificent. You swear at yourself going, why am I doing this all the way up? and then you get up there and you're like, now this is why I did this. Yeah. It's outstanding. And so that's what I've been doing. Now I'm more of a mountaineer than a mountain climber, which really means I travel a lot on glaciers, explore glaciers, and often that'll take me up the peaks or I scramble up the peaks. And then in terms of Kilimanjaro, that was very much a personal journey. Although I had my camera with me and I did get a few shots that I love, that was a very personal journey. My parents in 2005 had scheduled an adventure up Kilimanjaro. Sadly, my dad, they had to reschedule, or they had to cancel that journey because my dad's health prevented him from going up. And then they never made it up. And they've since both passed. And so I've always wanted to go up and carry them up with me. And so I had a small pill bottle of their ashes, and we made the 4.5 day journey up and then, back down again. But we made the 4.5 day journey up, and where I got to spend some time with them on the peak. And that was the primary purpose, was to take them up there so that they could finally say that they have ascended Kilimanjaro.
I bet your dad would have been proud of 4.5 days. Most people do it in 7, I've heard.
Well, it's 7 round trips. So I did it.
Okay.
I did it in 4.5 up to the summit, and then 2.5 for 2 days down. It's normally 5 days up, but I have a knee issue, and so the guide said we can. So the last day, the summit day, is normally 4,000 feet up and 9,000 feet down. And so the guide, knowing that I had a knee injury and that 9,000 feet would not be a good thing for it, we summited early and then took 2 days to do the 9,000 feet. So
the way down is the harder bit, though, isn't it? I've noticed. It took me probably half a year to recover from doing something I did a year and a half ago. Coming down the mountain was the bit for me that was the toughest.
I find that I struggle on the way up aerobically. On the way down, it's hard on the knees, right? Like, and that's where I developed a knee issue, is on the trips down. Because it wasn't an easy, that 9,000 feet isn't easy. It's not like walking down a smooth path. The terrain was very uneven, rocky. And so it was not the easiest of descents.
Normally, you're on your Todd, as they say. And what difference does that make, particularly with camera gear?
Well, so for me, I look at the adventure that I'm doing. So if it's a big day, like I'm going up a big peak, and I have to go up a big elevation gain, or travel a big distance, camera gear is the last thing that goes in, and it's usually just a body and a lens. And when I'm up high, my favorite, like, even though it's a telephoto, my 70-200, it's the F4 Canon F4, and so it's a small compact lens. I can still get those wide-looking field shots, or I can get the detailed shots. So I love carrying that. But when I plan for the adventure, it's what am I doing? And so that all the technical gear that needs to go into the pack goes into the pack first, then the food and water and extra clothing, and then based on whatever room I have left and weight and bulk I can carry in terms of my physical abilities, that my camera gear is the last thing that goes in. And often it's just, like I say, an extra battery, a camera, a body, or a lens, and a polarizing filter, and that's it.
You're somebody who obviously likes their own time, and I wonder whether this comes back to, you describe these as mountain therapy days, as much as they are photographic adventures and adventures in terms of climbing or mountaineering. You mentioned your brush with depression.
Yeah.
Tell me about how that allies to photography, stroke climbing, stroke walking, and that journey that you took.
Yeah, so I a bit about my journey is I've had 3 major episodes of depression through my life.
So not a brush, major episodes.
No, like year-long episodes, right? And part of it is I have I burnt my endocrine system out, so I have a challenge with testosterone. But anyways, in 2017 was my last one. And coming out of it, I was just like, there's no way I want to go back to that very dark place. I need to do something fundamentally different in my life. And I didn't set out this way, but quickly I discovered that spending days in the mountains and connecting with nature, whether it was with friends or myself, whether it was just driving down my favorite mountain highway or getting up high, I found with that connection with nature, the thrill of accomplishing whatever adventure that we are doing, and just spending time with friends was extremely beneficial for me.
Yeah.
And I started calling them my mountain therapy days. And it's to the point where my family recognizes when I need one of those and kicks me out the door. And I recognize it, and I kick myself out the door. It's all about connecting with nature. I knew that mountain therapy days were important, but I didn't really understand why, other than notionally being out in nature. So I recently spent some time doing research, and there's a ton of research out there that, you know, when you develop a strong connection with nature, it has such a beneficial impact on your mental health as well as the environment. That's why I want to do it and continue to do it and recommend that everybody do it. You don't have to go climb a mountain, but you got to get out, and whether it's in your garden, in the backyard, or just go for a walk in the park.
This morning, it's strange that we should be talking about this because, not necessarily strange, but it's timing, because this morning I took Sabarkalot for a walk, my fluffy friend just behind me there. And we were walking along a place I go a lot. I'm certainly not a mountaineer, but I walk along the flats of the canal that is very close to me. I love it. It goes for miles and miles and miles and miles. And as I was going along it, Lee, there was a lady sat down with a whole load of bags. And as I approached her, I thought, oh, maybe she's in trouble. And I got close to her, and she would have been in her 60s, maybe mid-60s-ish. And I said, are you okay? Have you taken a fall? Or she said, no, physically I'm absolutely fine. She said, mentally, not so fine. And I stopped to have a chat with her for a while. And she said, I've just picked up everything that was in my home that I wanted to take with me, and I've walked from Reading. So to give you some sort of context in that would have been a walk of about, where I saw her along the path, probably about 20 miles. I assume she's done that across a day or two with the amount she was carrying. And as we were talking, she said, I think nature's really important, and I think people have forgotten just how valuable and how precious it is.
I think with the, I don't want to belittle urbanization, but with urbanization and people spending a lot more time in the cities, I think, and technology on our phones, I think we have lost our connection. I think it's in part why we have the world that we have in terms of our environment and the impact that we have on our environment and the impact on our mental health. And it is so important. And it doesn't need to be this massive walk or go up a mountain. They say, just spending time in your garden, tending to your garden, your flowers, going for a small walk in the park, your local park, where there's green. Apparently green is really important in the research that I've done. And I feel it myself. Like I say, whether it's the sense of accomplishment or nature, like that, again, I refer to the photo and I will supply that to you, but it's what nature's created. It just amazes me. The words that come out of my mouth are what the heck and how the heck. What the heck is that? And how the heck did nature create that?
In terms of the photography, so how does that story all? You left being an accountant. We're quite a way through our conversation, and I'm trying to join the dots or join the jigsaw pieces together here as to how the photography started as your living then.
So, in 16, I reflected on what I wanted to do, and friends would encourage me, Lee. They say, your photography is good enough. You need to try to go into the photography world. So even in the corporate world, the thing that I love to do the most, one of the things I love to do is teaching. And so so you have, when you go into the photography business, you have to, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to do weddings? Am I going to do corporate? You go through this mindset of what you're going to do. And I still wanted to remain in nature as much as possible. And so the workshop element, the mentorship element, and trying to sell prints, and lately it's been speaking, once I got, developed a reputation, and then I started to speak. And so, yeah, it's been a fun journey a fun puzzle to solve.
There's a wonderful picture on your website of, in fact, it's a piece of video, it's a piece of film of you kneeling down on the ice. You've got, I think it is your 70 to 200 on a body in one hand. I think somebody's skating around you, unless you're actually actively commanding a drone at the same time, which would
no, that's my buddy Paul. He was skating around me.
So tell me about the skating and the photography. There can't be many photographers stroke skaters doing what you do.
Again, it's back to my childhood, right? I played hockey. I loved to skate. And so we decided to try to, get out on the ice, on the lakes when they freeze.
Yeah.
And so we get out there, and often the first thing we do is we skate around, try to find some, again, nature has just created some amazing structures. There is the iconic methane bubbles, which is the rotting material at the bottom of a lake. The bubbles, rotting material toots out of, let's go gas, right? It bubbles up, and while the ice is freezing, they freeze in the lake. And so there's that iconic structures but there's other amazing structures that you can photograph. And then we put the camera gear down and channel our inner childhood. We'll play hockey, we'll pass a puck, we'll just skate around. One of the fondest memories I had is we were out on the ice in pitch black weather. Like, it was dark, it was like midnight. And we had a net, and we set our headlamps down on the ice and played hockey at midnight on ice. It's just all about channeling our inner childhood.
And Lee Nordbye, my guest, returns for part 2 on the show soon. It's a beautiful day today. Look at this, pups. The sun's shining. There's not a cloud in the sky. Cue the song. Let's just look back along the path, make a sketchbook picture. It's one of those grumpy swans in the background. Oh, he's just hidden. What should we do? F5.6. And I'm always slightly underexposed. -1 stop. 5.6. 1500 shutter speed. ISO 160. And there we go. Oh, another one. Fab. A sketchbook picture for the show. Right, back to your letters. Another Chris Smith. It's almost, Chris, like you knew of the conversation I was having today with Lee Nordbye. Although that couldn't have happened because your letter arrived 2 weeks before the chat that you're hearing with Lee. Unless, of course, you can see into the future, in which case we need to have a chat, you and I. About the lotto mainly, because Mrs. Sharma next door, my friend Mrs. Sharma, despite her best efforts, she's continually selling me these wrong numbers. I say, Mrs. Sharma, your lotto tickets, they seem not to work. Anyway, from Chris, hello Neil. When you said in the podcast that you were looking for hiking/mountain photos with a story, that made me stop in my tracks. Literally, much to my dog's annoyance as I was walking him at the time. And the attached picture jumped to mind. The story behind this one starts back in... Oh, that's a big, heavy-duty diesel running in the background there, pups. Can you hear that? That's not the Pinstriped Express. That's a big freighty, that one, pups. We'll be in trouble for not getting a picture for our Thomas's Instagram. Huh? I'm his eyes when we're out on these walks. Where were we? Yes, stop me in my tracks. Yes. The story behind this picture starts back in 2014 when my mental health took a turn that changed my life. I had to spend some time in a hospital unit that gave me the help I needed to move forward, and everything I knew just changed. I moved to a new area. I found a new job. It was a new everything, really. Not to dwell on this part too much, but it's with these new and terrifying changes that I began to meet some new people as well. Now, as with most people you meet and befriend, it's essential that you have a common thread, something to start a conversation about. Hill walking and the outdoors was one such thing that a new work colleague and I had in common. And while working long hours in the hospitality industry, we'd plan a day on the hills to blow away the cobwebs of work. As I didn't drive at the time, he'd drive into the Peak District, a beautiful part of this country for these days out, and I'd pay for the first coffee of the day and the first pint, in brackets or two, of ale once we got back. We became firm friends, and we still are to this day. The picture I've sent, which I'll pop on the show page today, is taken in the Lake District near Buttermere, on the tops near Great Gable and Haystacks. I love these names. We organised a few days in the lakes camping in April 2015 and didn't really plan much other than booking a campsite for 2 tents and a table at the pub next door. Important stuff, obviously. We headed into Keswick, had our coffee and then headed out towards Great Gable. It was a peak neither of us had ever walked, so that's where we headed, with maps, with boots and all our walking gear. The outdoors had become my safe space and helped me as part of my mental health well-being. Add on photography, and that was a great distraction that took me to far better places. The weather this day was good, bit windy, but the views spectacular. I took this photograph of my walking buddy enjoying the view as it just jumped out at me as breathtaking, with the background and lighting playing along very nicely indeed. See, Chris, this is where wind is good actually. Blows those clouds through and you get shadows across the landscape. Different shapes, different textures. A windy day, yeah, I suppose if you're walking against the wind, it's not a lot of fun. But photographically, a windy day with the sunshine, bit of a mixture, perfect. 10 years on, says Chris, and my now ex-work colleague is still an amazing friend who I still speak with and see regularly, although we don't get out into the hills as often as we used to. We still talk about life, mini adventures, and days out on the hills, but every time I see this picture, it brings a huge smile across my face. I remember a great trip with a good mate and the start of a new journey in life. Chris, your picture is on the show page. I love the rugged ground in front of you, and this is what you describe. This plays perfectly into the mountain therapy my guest Lee Nordbye has been talking about this week, doesn't it? It really does. The friendship as well, finding a friendship and starting, here comes the overused J word, but I don't mind using it in this context, the friendship that started your new journey in life. Fantastic letter, thank you for it, thank you for the picture, and as I say, it's on the show page today.
Before we return to this week's show, my thanks to those who keep us walking each week, such as our patrons, you know who you are, and now arthelper.ai for the next few months. If you've ever thought about selling your photography online but haven't a clue where to start, I think Art Helper could probably help you because it's made for people like us. Here's how it works. You upload a photo, magically and instantly, professional content is made for you, such as social media posts, email newsletters, even full Substack articles, all in your own voice. It can also generate hundreds of mock-ups for every image you upload, things like your work framed, so people get a real understanding of what your photograph could look like on their wall. It helps you connect with the right buyers and even suggests pricing based on your market. And unlike most AI tools, it has an art protection guarantee, which means something very important: your images are never used for AI training. Free to try, and Art Helper is giving our listeners a special deal. Go to arthelper.ai, use the code PHOTOWALK and get 30 days free of the pro version. I'll have a link on the show page. It's a great way to start selling your art or growing the business you already have. And thank you, arthelper.ai, for your belief in this show.
It's the photo walk of a Friday. Me with my camera and microphone, you with your camera. Not always, I know. So, sometimes the mails we've had in the past of you doing the vacuum cleaning or household chores or driving somewhere. But it's the photo walk of a Friday. Send your pictures from your walks to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show, along with your stories, your written ones, your narratives. In 2026, we have some very exciting travel plans for you and your cameras. Travel is the promise of the unfamiliar, and that's the exciting thing about it, especially when you take along a camera. The unscripted, as we called it. The unforgettable, the feeling of your first step in a place where nothing feels routine. And everything begs to be photographed. That's how it feels when you travel with a camera. In 2026 then, these are our plans. We're making plans for Kolkata and Varanasi in India in March, and Mongolia with the eagle hunters in September. With possibly a new printing retreat in Scotland next June. I might be talking too early about that. But right now we're registering names for interest, and it looks like Mongolia could almost be full in terms of interest, that is, before the big release. So write to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show, if you'd like to be included in the info lists and have more details about it as we start to plan those adventures a bit more thoroughly. Right, we need a new assignment for the month, don't we, since we're now in April. April already? Where did that month go? There are 2 winners to announce for the last couple of months as well. Let's do that first. This is where I wriggle and squirm very uncomfortably about the word winner, because the idea behind this feature is the inspiration you get from seeing the collections on our website, as much as it is about winning a famous, not so famous flask. But we do need 2 names to receive them, although you have to promise to take them on an adventure and photograph them. That is our deal. And February's assignment was set by David Wright. The assignment brief was eyes, if you remember. There were some powerful ideas sent in. There really were some great thoughts that came in with your letters or your pictures as well. And the flask on this particular one goes to Petter Rustad, who sent in a picture of somebody peering out of a train window. Another motive from Scotland from me, says Petter. This was taken on the train on the way over the Tay Bridge in Dundee. Petter, there's something about the way the child, because I think it is a child, is looking out of the window. It really is like they're caught between thoughts, between places. You just want to know what's going on in their head. You've got a quiet picture here, but it's something that really pulls you in. The layering, and the unexpected composition. Jogger going past, simply wonderful. Really is. I absolutely adored this picture. And then for March, well, this was hard too. Right in front of me, by the way, there's some beautiful red kites. When you get close to them, they're huge, aren't they? Once upon a time, I used to worry about pups in the back garden because we have red kites everywhere around us. And I thought, blimey, will one of those be able to lift him out? They are gorgeous. I wish I had a longer lens on me. I'd make more than a sketchbook photograph for you. Anyway, yes, March. The one word was humanity. Such an open interpretation here, which really makes the challenges sing with difference when we get a word like this. I've chosen for this one the picture sent in by Mark Potvin. It's a picture of a young couple. I think young, their faces are obscure, but I think they're young, in such a strong and very, very emotive hug. It's a picture that, again, just like the one I mentioned a moment ago, really asks questions. And that's why it's appealed to me in terms of choosing it. Let me read the words that came with this picture. You can see the pictures on the website. Just go to the February and March assignment links and you'll see them. They're at the top of the page. After a week-long retreat in Bristol, says Mark with a C, I returned to Lithuania, where I was stationed as the curate of a small chapel in Kaunas. Vilnius was my connection, and I had time before my train would leave. That day was rainy as only the Baltics can be. I sat in a cafe, drenched in my cassock, waiting for clearer skies, eager to walk the streets of the old town and photograph some of the sights and shrines. Most of all, the famed icon of the Virgin of the Gate of Dawn. After taking photographs of the shrine, I crossed a small square intent on visiting a Russian chapel. As I looked over, I saw the sight of these two people on a bench, just as they appear in the photograph. When I saw them, I just stopped. All I could do was wonder. Were they a couple breaking up? Did they learn of some terrible news? Was one of them sick? What caused this absolute embrace of compassion? Was it grief? Our paths crossed, but they had no idea, and that single moment did more for my soul than the week, and I would argue years, prior. This is my first photography submission of any kind. In an age that could easily be pinned as compulsively creating, I want to continue photography for my own learning and fulfillment. But when I heard the assignment on the podcast, I just knew I had to submit this one. This was humanity for me at a time when I needed to be reminded of it most. It's also my thanks to these two people, unknown to me as they are. What a beautiful story. Now, can I just say, because I have been asked, do all the pictures have to be made in a certain time frame? To which I have two answers, yes and no, which is very unhelpful, I know, but let me explain. I do like the idea, I very much enjoy the idea that many of the assignment pictures we receive have you thinking about where you're walking over the last 30 days or so, what you see. And it definitely gives your eyes a chance to seek out fresh adventures. But also, and this is the no bit, it's a chance for you when it's appropriate, so you don't just go into a back catalogue and pull anything out. When it's appropriate and you really have something that fits the brief with a great narrative as well, if it's a really great archive piece, much the same as the greats do when they're making a book or something, yes, dip back. All I ask is that you think, why, when you send the picture in. And this particular one, Mark, it was just phenomenal. Right, are you ready for a new challenge then? I think so, Neil. You will like this. It's from a former guest, Jim Richardson.
The photo walk assignment.
A one-word assignment. What word would you choose?
Context.
And why context? Give me some context for the context.
Context is all the things you put within the frame of a photograph that contribute to make it into a storytelling picture.
Right.
It's how we know and how we interpret photographs when we look at them. And it's hard to do, but it's such a valuable skill to think of about how you do it and why it contributes to making pictures better.
Can you give me an example of a picture you've taken that shows this context?
Sure. Go find when I went out to the Isle of Muck and I was photographing Lawrence McEwen up on top of his island, Muck, and within the photograph you have Lawrence, and Lawrence is a great portrait. I mean, he's got these eagle eyes and this hair blowing, and he's just a great character.
Wonderful.
But with it is his sheepdog is over on one side of the frame, and the island is stretching out into the sea, and the bay is over on the right side of the frame, and the Isle of Egg is in the background, and all of that. So it's not just like, a tight portrait of Lawrence, which would have been good too, but it's Lawrence in context. It's Lawrence in his environment. He's in his world, and this is what his world looks like, and it enriches what we know about him because there is context.
Best of luck with this one. Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. If you can, resize the picture to 2,500 pixels wide. You are an absolute star. If you can't, don't worry, I'll do the heavy lifting. Send me some thoughts about the picture as well, if you think it helps to tell more of the story. Sometimes that's not necessary, but often the narratives, the stories that come with them, like the one, or the ones you heard, are fantastic. They really are. No watermarks, no borders, but do include social feeds or website details, your Flickr, your glass, your photo with an F, or wherever we can enjoy more of your work so I can link to it. The pictures and the stories will go onto the assignments page, and some may well also feature on our Photo Walk Instagram, which helps get hopefully some more eyes on your work and helps our community to grow. I'll be sure to tag straight back to your profile, of course. Good luck. The assignment for April is set. Context. I'm not sure you can hear it. In fact, I'm pretty sure you won't be able to hear it, but in the background, just very, very lightly. Now, I'm not sure you'll hear it. The sound of children playing in a playground, which I love. That sound is such a precious sound. I'm lucky to live, or we're lucky to live in a house that it doesn't back onto a primary school, but it's pretty close. And my wife, Sam, left the school a year ago to work in secondary school education for a year, and then realised she really did enjoy working with the younger children, and so has gone back. And she starts the new term, which is a couple of weeks away. And I always, when our children went to that school, I used to sit in the garden with a cup of tea when I knew it was playtime, and listen to the sound of the children just running around, screaming and laughing, and it's a wonderful sound. And then when they left, I knew that Sam was there in a teaching role, and I knew that a lot of the stuff that she did during playtimes and school break times was all about sport. So I always imagine that the kids are laughing and screaming with the daft things that my wife does with them. With the funny games, the fun and games. So yeah, I do enjoy that noise. Like that noise, pups? Do you? You look a bit indifferent. Remember, this month you can win yourself a pair of Lover, spelled L-O-W-A, just to confuse you, Lover boots for the trail if you send in a great story about your walking adventures with a camera. This one, due to shipping, I'm afraid, is for our UK friends this time. I know, pups, I wish it could go all around the world. I know. Write in. If you have a complaint, write in. But don't be grumpy. There's enough grumpiness in the world. Send your stories and your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. Here comes a Pinstriped Express, pups. There we go. Not as nice as the sound of the kids playing in the playground, I'll grant you that one. We'll return in a moment to my guest, Lee Nordbye, but if ever there were a time to read a letter in a week where we're talking about the mental health benefits of nature and photography and finding your version of mountain therapy, this is a wonderful last letter into the show today from our friend Myles Barfield. A letter, see, I like them when they're titled, a letter called Growing. The photograph that comes with it is on the show page. It's a fabulous, fabulous reveal of a long and winding road. Cue the song, shrouded in mist. In fact, I used it on the Instagram page as well. It's a shame. Instagram, when you look at a grid, it's now very portrait orientated, isn't it? And this is a landscape orientated picture. But if it just comes up in your feed, that'll be absolutely fine. Of course, hello Neil, says Myles. The journey toward healing began for me along this very road when the art of photography blossomed. It was a beacon of light in darker times. Years have passed since that first step, and recently I returned to this, well, what for me is a very sacred place. With my drone soaring skyward, I captured this picture, a visual echo of my journey while cycling this very spot. I did look at the picture, by the way, and I did try to see if I could spot you cycling along the road. I know you're going to say, don't be daft, Neil, I was to one side, but I thought, well, I know that drones can follow you. So I thought, oh, where's Myles in that mist cycling? Is he there? Can I see him? And I decided in the end, after quite a lot of peering into the photograph, that you weren't along the road yourself. I had no grand expectations, says Myles, in capturing this image, but what I saw through the lens was a profound reflection of my soul. In past conversations with you, I've shared how photography has been my vessel of healing. It's been so much more than a mere hobby, and I really mean this. It's a pilgrimage of the soul. Oh, Myles! Again, when I grow up, I want to be able to write like this. This spot and this photo represents the fog of depression lifting, revealing a warm, hopeful glow of the sun, metaphorically and pictorially, I would say, Myles. This image isn't just a picture to me, he says. It's a testament to the power of embracing our passions and finding light in our personal journeys of healing and growth. Myles, I guess you really need to, on this occasion, to be looking at the picture to accompany these particular words. And as I say, they are on the show page, but beautifully put. It really is. A perfect letter in context. See, I'm thinking of Jim Richardson, although audibly this time. A perfect letter in the context, that is, of today's show. So thank you so much for sending it in. Right, part 2 of my conversation now. My conversational meander, that is, this week, with the teacher, the speaker, the landscape photographer, the exploring photographer, as you've no doubt worked out by now, Lee Nordbye.
We started out by talking about your adventures in the peaks and getting up high, Lee, to make your photographs. But there's also another project I'm interested in called Below the Peak. And I'm interested in where that comes from and what it is.
Yeah, so the origin of that whole project is in 2020, I decided I need to do a photo exhibit. I've never done one before. I have no idea how to go about doing that. So I met with my printer who has done a number of exhibits, and we had coffee, and the biggest piece of advice coming out of that coffee was, Lee, you need to go and you need to pick a theme or a story or a series that is unique. And so, mountain peaks in this area are not a unique theme. So I went back and I went through 5 years of history of photographs, and I learned that I have an affinity for stuff that doesn't involve peaks. And so I called the series exhibition Below the Peak,
yeah.
Thinking that would be, the end of it. No, it's inspired me to go out there and find those detailed scenes that don't include a peak more. And now it's creating a series along 5 or 6 themes that I hopefully eventually turn into a book. And it's all about capturing the beauty, intrigue, and mystique of the Canadian Rockies that doesn't include a peak, mountain peak in it.
Is one of those themes Into the Light? Because that hints at a very personal story, doesn't it?
It is, and it's all about my challenges with mental health.
Yeah.
And I've often wondered, I in terms of my editing style, especially when I get those moments of dark shadows and light, they become very bold in terms of very rich blacks.
Yeah, they are very bold.
And very, I push the limits, not to the edge, but I push the limits on even my whites. And I think it's about my journey from the dark shadows of depression to the soft light of happiness. And so I'm drawn to those scenes, and I'm drawn to edit those scenes in that manner.
I suppose the picture that I am looking at behind you, which is, did you title it Ice Caves?
This one is called Trifecta because in it you've got a ice wall on the left that goes up and over to a massive rock wall and a frozen waterfall. Like I have never, we've never explored. We've explored a number of ice caves which are along the toe of glaciers or on the edge of glaciers, and I've never ever seen something like that up. That was back in 21, and I've never seen anything since. It was just this mind-blowing experience when we walked in, or we finally were able to make it into the cave to see that.
I would imagine many of these places you're probably better to take somebody like Paul. It's not so safe to just be on your own. I'm thinking now, inevitably sooner or later, I'm going to go for the bear story. There's always a bear. But in practicality terms and safety terms, having somebody with you is probably wise in this kind of environment, isn't it?
Absolutely. Ice caves in particular we try to explore for them and in them in the winter and spring. In the summer they become much more they're unstable to begin with. That was in February, and I don't know if you can see, but in the bottom left corner, all that is fresh ice that had fallen.
Yeah.
In February. So when we got in there, we recognized it was fresh ice. So we didn't dawdle, and we explored the cave as much as we could, got our photos, and got out of there before anything untoward happened to us. And so these ice caves can be, even in the winter, become unstable. They're moving glaciers. Yeah, they move at a snail's or less than a snail's pace, but they are moving. And ice can collapse. And so going in there with friends is absolutely important. Accessing these caves, in some instances, you need to maneuver around or through avalanche territory. Like this one, avalanches where we got to the point where we needed to start to go up, and the avalanches, we looked up and they were falling all around it. We observed them for like 15 minutes. None of the avalanches ever came remotely close to the cave, but you need to understand how to navigate yourself through avalanche territory.
How do you navigate yourself through an actual avalanche? Is there a plan, or is it just just wait for it to hit?
It's all about prevention.
Yes,
it's all about prevention. You get caught in an avalanche, you have, I think, when I got to update my course, you have less than 15 minutes to find the person and dig them out of cement like ice or snow before they die. And often it can be less, and they can be buried. So it's all about prevention. So it's all about understanding. There's apps where you can understand the hazard. When you travel through an avalanche territory, you separate yourself out. You have beacons so you can find them. You have poles, you have shovels, but it's all about prevention.
Is there a one element you always come back to when we talk about texture and geometry and light? Is there one element that you come back to again and again that has become your staple?
I've been told, and when I look at my work, it's texture. Even though I love shape and form, like I have the other series, one of the other series in Below the Peak is called Sculpt.
Yeah,
and to which this photograph behind me is part of. But even those are highly textured images. And so I think it's texture. And I just find, I'm a black and white guy, and I find texture to really shout out loudly in black and white. I find it can get lost in colors, especially if there's more than two colors in a photograph and very different colors on the wheel. I find the story is more about color than texture. And so I love to do that's why one of the big reasons I love black and white.
What's the plan for the work then, Lee? Well, where does, and it's a project that I would imagine is not simply going to end overnight. This is an ongoing thing, isn't it?
Yep.
Well,
yes.
What's the plan for the work as you move along?
So this whole Below the Peak thing is, I think it's two things. One, it's a book. Ultimately, I'm trying to do an inventory right now of where I'm at, and then eventually try to hopefully get it published in a book. And because all the books, again, it's all the books in the Rockies here are about the wide epic scenes or the adventure-oriented scenes. And so I think there's an ability to get out a book that tells a story, gives people a sense of what beauty exists beyond those peaks and adventures. So hopefully it's a book. And then I print and sell my work. And hopefully people find it equally fascinating as I do and would love to have that hanging on their wall as fine art, very limited edition fine art print. Always, when I showcase the work, whether it's in an exhibition online, it's about telling the stories of engaging with nature and trying to figure out how the heck nature's formed such magnificent structures, or nature has created this epic moment of light, or this epic abstract reflection where you've timed it just perfectly with the breath of wind or the perfect mirror reflection. It's about telling those stories, and hopefully through those stories, getting more and more people engaged in nature.
we've been talking about a place that's very dear to you, but you've explored many parts of the world. I'm gonna test you here with, I say test. I'm just going to ask you to give me the first thing that comes to mind, maybe a sentence or two of some of the amazing places that you have photographed and adventured in. Let's start with Greenland.
Back to my amazement of what nature has created, to see the icebergs and the way they've been calved off the glacier in Ilulissat. It's an ice fjord. And so as far as you can see, it's just mass backlog of icebergs, and they're all forms and different shapes. And then you see Aurora dancing over them. Yeah. And it's just like, oh my God. And at the time I was there, and I'm guessing still now, it's not as popular as, say, Iceland. And so you're there by yourself or with very few other people, which I love, right? I want people to get out and explore nature, but at times I get a bit selfish and want to be there by myself, right? And so it's because of that, it's epic.
Very different temperature. Namibia.
Oh, variety. When you're traveling down a gravel road or a highway, the landscapes change every hour. It's from sand dunes to moonscapes to, while the last time we were there, it had a ton of rain. And so there was wildflowers and you got wildlife. It's variety is the name. It's a wonderful place to visit.
I would imagine it's going to be hard then. Tanzania, are you gonna have to apply the same word there in some ways?
Yes. Absolutely. So that was two different ventures. That was Kilimanjaro, which we talked about already.
Yep.
And then the Serengeti. And I'm not a wildlife photographer. I describe myself as opportunistic. So if something jumps out in front of me, I'll photograph it. But in the Rockies, I don't purposely go out and photograph wildlife. Whereas in Serengeti, that's what it was all about. And cats, I guess for Serengeti, it's a cats. I had a couple great moments with some cats that are just very enjoyable.
Bhutan.
Rockies are hills compared to the Himalaya. They're little wee hills. It's like, oh my God, the size of them things is just mind-boggling. I remember one time the day we were about to summit the pass, and I'm standing at about 4,500 meters, and I'm looking at two of the mountains, Jiu-Jitsu Drake and Jolamahari, both well over 7,000 meters. Oof. And at the point that I'm looking at them, there's still another 2,600 or more meters into the clouds that they're going. And one of the iconic mountains that I drive by almost on every adventure is Castle Mountain. And that's its height from sea level.
That's incredible.
So it's just like you can sit Castle Mountain on top of these from where I was, and they would be at the same height. It's mind-boggling.
Sweden.
That was an interesting one. So Nordic skating. So I love, as we talked about, I love to wildlife skate, right? Which is which is hockey skates. And so I signed up for Nordic skating, and I'm like, okay, it's just a different name for what I do. And I show up there, and it's like he pulls out boots, and then he pulls out the skates, and I'm like, what is going on here? It's skating. It's like cross-country skis, except on these little itty-witty bee skates blades that you attach your boot to. Everything else is the same. It's a cross-country ski boot, cross-country ski poles on these little skates. And I'm like, how the heck am I going to do this? I had to learn how to skate all over again, but I did. And it was a lot of fun. And the other interesting thing is one of my very first experiences when I got onto the Baltic Sea. So that was the other mind-blowing thing is I'm skating on sea ice.
Oh, yeah. How
How is that possible? Right. And it's the Baltic Sea. So it's brackish. Salt content is a lot less, and it's not tidal. So it can freeze. And I was so lucky that it had frozen for the first time in 10 years. So I was able to skate on it. And when we got on there, one of the very first things I discovered was what we call here in Canada, frost flowers. And they're literally frost that looks like a flower. Oh, and they go onto the ice surface. It's caused by moisture in the air. Beautiful. Right. And we have some lakes, depending upon the year, can get a ton of them. And I'm like, wow, look at these frost flowers. And my guide looks at me and goes, yeah, we call them roses. And I'm like, I'm thousands of miles away doing something similar but different, and there's virtually the same name.
I'm very lucky that I go reasonably often to Norway, and I take a train line from Oslo, and it goes out around the fjords. You see all the skaters, and they're way out. It's a very liberating experience, I hear.
It is. To do it in a different country was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And Nordic skating, the way they do it, you can travel is in a very efficient way. Once you get the hang of it, you can travel distances very quickly. And just to be on that open ice and not have anybody around me other than swans. Every once in a while, there would be open water and there'd be these massive swans. It is liberating. It is very, very peaceful.
Let's change tack as we wend our way back through the fjords and back home for the final few moments of our chat. Lee, I see you offer mentorship, and of late I've talked to the importance of being mentored, either formally or informally, and then how photographers mentor photographers themselves, when it feels appropriate to offer advice, and so on. Mentoring and mentorship is part of your life as a professional photographer, as it is for many more photographers these days. And the landscape is definitely changing, isn't it, to embrace education far more? Yeah.
So through my journey, I've had the luxury of having some very, very good photographers provide me what I describe as informal mentorship. I never had a formal mentor program with them, but they would always take time, whether it was their own time, they'd see a photograph and they'd send me some wonderful feedback. Every time I asked them for feedback or on anything from a photograph to my portfolio to the business, they would always be willing to take time out of their extremely busy schedule. And I wouldn't be here without it. I would not be where I'm at without it. And so I decided a few years ago that my way of giving back and returning as much as I can of that gift that I got was to operate my own mentorship program. So every year in December, I open it up to applications. And so they got to send a small portfolio of photographs, a small essay on what really inspires them about photography, really what gets them excited about photography and what they want to do with it. And often it's their story more so than their photographs that attracts me to them.
Yeah.
And so then I select 2 or 3. I found that, it's not only my support, but it's the support of each other that really they get a lot of benefit from. So it's 2 or 3 people, and then we work through their goals for the year. And then hopefully at the end of it, they feel that they've advanced their journey. And it's everything from how to take a better photograph to, I've helped someone start off their own business to now we're working in the world of a bit of fine art world, where how to navigate the world of competitions and open calls and that type of thing.
Well, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you, Lee. I have a question that I end every show with now. In fact, just before I ask that question, you do, by the way, have the beard I aspire to. That is Lee, the explorer's beard. It's ironic because only the other day we had our big Zoom thing that we have for patrons, and somebody said to me, we were talking about advertising, and somebody said, as long as you don't go into lots of grooming adverts. And I'm going to ask a grooming question because I've never asked one before. How long does it take to get the proper explorer beard, Lee? Look at me. I bow in the presence of my beard mentor.
I have to say, actually, this is short.
What?
This is short. I had it down to my chest bone at one point.
Okay.
And I think at that point, my wife went, whoa. And so I've shortened it over time. But 2018, I worked in the oil patch. I was an accountant, never had a beard. So in 2018, I decided to grow one. And I never shaved it for 2 or 3 years.
Oh, there we go.
Other than the odd little trim here and there.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I step in front of the camera and model for my photography friends' workshops. So I've got one coming up in June, so I'm letting it grow out a bit.
Do you ever dye it?
No. This is all natural gray. It's a salt and pepper look. I'm going for the salt and pepper look.
I like it a lot. So I've got a few years of growth in it then if I've only just started. Right, come on. The question I ask, and I'd be really intrigued because of your mammoth journey that you've had, both physically and mentally and photographically. What, Lee, is your why?
I've done a lot of reflection of that, and I think ultimately it's to help for me, but also the viewers we live in an extraordinarily challenging world. Whether we have our own personal challenges or if we think about the world that we currently live in, there's a lot of there's a huge amount of challenges. And so it's to provide those moments of relief, to provide moments of curiosity, to provide people with the opportunity to think about developing their own connection or kinship with nature, and to continue my connection with nature, and to provide my moments of relief. And hopefully I can inspire people or help people along the way to do the same.
And my thanks to Lee Nordbye this week for being my guest. I love what he says on his website. There's much that he says on his website, but there's a big, big, bold statement which simply says, "A heart full of wanderlust, camera in hand." And, that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little further together, then that's what the Extra Mile edition is all about. We're up to 133. You go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you. This week, a photographer called Matt Jacob joins me for part one of a two-parter, actually. A two-parter extra miler over the next 2 weeks. Matt's story starts with a disposable camera in one hand and a dream of flying in the other, if you can have a dream in the other hand. I think you can, and somehow both those things came true. He became a pilot and he became a photographer. But it was a cancer diagnosis at a young age that really shifted everything. That's when he realised that life isn't about necessarily the big dramatic moments. It's about the quieter ones too. The ones that you watch and you feel and maybe try to hold on to through a photograph, much like our friend Myles was talking about earlier with his beautiful misty picture, the one taken with a drone. So I'm very much looking forward to my conversation with Matt.
On this week's Extra Mile.
But you still have to diversify. It's such a saturated industry. The competition is higher than ever. You throw in social media, throw in threats of AI, topical conflicts around the world, travel restrictions, whatever it might be, the challenge to diversify is as present as ever, I think, as a photographer. So, my kind of niche in that I enjoy the most is education. So I really enjoy kind of giving back in that respect. So I really kind of see my diversification in photography, not just with assignments, but with education.
And alongside Matt, Lee Nordbye returns just for 3 more stops. Just one more thing. If you go to the website and you follow the link that says Extra Mile or the orange button actually in the top right-hand corner that says support, you get to listen to 5 minutes of the show for free. And you can join the Extra Milers as well. Be sure to join the Extra Mile through the website now. It's the by far the better way to do it. After that, you can listen to the shows through whatever app you wish. But the best way to join it, the best way for the show, is by going via the website, photowalk.show. Our PS is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song, just to make some final frames to or think about what's been said today. I needed something rugged, something bluesish, something perhaps a little country in there as well. Country blues, Neil? Oh yes, that sort of thing. But I definitely needed something, I don't think I've used this as a way to describe music before. I definitely needed something a bit beardy in sound. And I've gone for this, for the play-out song this week. This is Timbo, When the Hurricane Comes In.
Just you wait to listen for the storm. Hear the difference in the wind. When dark clouds form and start to turn, I'll run again. Far away when the hurricane comes in. Well, I'm the only island in the way, but I was born to fight the wind and rain. Sometimes a man will keep himself in shame, mask a painful past he overcame. Oh yes, oh, oh yes. Well, you've been steady, building steam like a thunderhead, armed and ready with the lies you overheard. Well, strike me down like a lightning in the dark, deliver me the fate I must deserve. Oh, don't you? I just wait and listen for the storm. You can hear the difference in the wind. When the dark clouds form and start to turn, I'll run again. Far away when the hurricane comes in. When the dark clouds form and start to turn, I'll run again. Far away when the hurricane, oh, that old hurricane comes.
When the hurricane comes in from Timbo. Let's do a final sketchbook picture. Go on, pups. It's getting quite warm. It's getting to that time of year, oh, maybe not just yet, but where we have to think about doing the walks definitely very, very early. I love the reeds here, just so he doesn't overheat, the dog that is, or me. 1700 shutter speed, f5.6, ISO 160, the reed beds. The reeds, they will be a beautiful, very vibrant green soon. They've got what I call their winter plumage at the moment. Right, news about next week. It's Easter holes. I know that, Neil. So we have one of our customary weeks off to spend time with family, doing family things. But as far as I'm planning at the moment, it doesn't mean there isn't a show. There's an edition, an archive edition, a straight interview edition with two photographer heroes of mine. You're supposed to have heroes, Neil. Yes, why not? Two photographers I feel very lucky to have spoken with. Joel Meyerowitz, the full conversation, the re-edited conversation, and Ed Cashy from the Seven Agency. So lots of conversation next week and less walking. Although we can walk along together as we listen to the conversations. But the week after, all being well, it is the Indian special. Still so much work to do on that. But just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness. That's what it's about, a community. A safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we love, photography and walking. A few mentions for those who smooth the voyage, for me in particular. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT. Looks after is an understatement. If your IT is holding on with duct tape and a prayer, our head of IT is standing by, I say. Remote help, real solutions, no judgment. Well, I say no judgment, but he does look at me in a strange way sometimes. If you'd like him to help you with your IT, I'll link you two together. My thanks also to Andrea Gilpin, who keeps a watchful eye over Instagram, as does Kelly Mitchell for Facebook, and to Michael Mixon, who helps with show research. Write a postscript for the show. Today, it's from the late Galen Roll, who was a pioneering adventure photographer. I would so love to have spoken with him. And a mountaineer too, who blended technical skill with a deep reverence for wild places. I'll put some films actually on the show page. I'll link to some films so you can watch him at work. There's cruel irony in the PS I'm about to read to you because Galen was taken way too soon from us. But he did say this, and it is a truism. You only get one sunrise and one sunset a day, and you only get so many days on the planet. A good photographer does the math and doesn't waste either. Come on, pups. Let's go for the bacon butty. Oh, bacon butty day, come on. Don't tell anybody, obviously. It's our secret. Just you and me. Shh. Don't say a word. Come on.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.